Toy Story 4 changed my life. The fact that this is a thing I just said is just as surreal to me as the fact that I'm finally trying to make a video essay for the first time. The thing is, I never thought that I would love this movie nearly as much as I do. Before I get called a Disney shill, let me just say that I had absolutely no faith in this movie whatsoever from the concept and marketing alone. I grew up with the first two movies and enjoyed the third, but I was firmly in the camp that while I didn't love the third, it ended things perfectly. I remember sitting at a play rehearsal the day the teaser trailer dropped, and I thought to myself, in bafflement, boy, this is not selling me. I wasn't thrilled with that second trailer either, and I didn't even watch the third. It seemed like a rehash of the second movie, which at the time was my favorite Pixar film. I never could have fathomed that a movie that seemed so uninspired from the trailers would grow to be my favorite animated film ever, and among my favorite movies ever. It's number 3 right now. I'll be the first to admit that my reasons for loving the film are 100% subjective. While I will go into why I think the film works, this video is more about why it works for Jack Hillebrecht. That's me, by the way. This video is chronicling my journey, and is trying to make a larger point about how any art can move us. Why thoughtful films are truly important. I have grown so much in the past year since I saw Toy Story 4 in theaters, and here's why. There is a plethora of reasons why people don't like this movie.
It is an absolute travesty. For people like me, 22 years old, upper teens, 19, 18, even people pushing 30 that have grown up with Toy Story, anyone that has grown up with that would see this movie as a desecration to their childhood.
But what I can't wrap my head around is when people say that the movie doesn't try anything new.
Because he took a common utensil and made it into the main character of a movie with a rich history of fantastic characters. That's nothing. The good characters get no screen time at all.
Regardless of your thoughts on the creative choices, this movie is gutsy. It challenges some of the internal logic of the Toy Story universe, and I can totally understand why one might not like that, but it is something different. To me, that's what makes the movie Toy Story 4 work as a beautiful standalone film. The key to this movie comes from the notion of ownership and attachment in the Toy Story universe, and how the concept of a lost toy plays into all of these films. I think that the essence of Toy Story 4 comes from this line from the original film.
I'm lost. Oh, I'm a lost toy.
In the world of Toy Story, particularly for Woody, the idea of a lost toy is the worst possible reality. Toy Story 4 makes it a point to subtly remind the viewers on this idea by presenting the concept of a lost toy in negative contexts. The idea that a toy's existence is predicated on the unconditional love of another is reinforced in the series and in this installment.
Somewhere in that pat of stuffing is a toy who taught me that life's only worth living if you're being loved by a kid. And I traveled all this way to rescue that toy.
I need a child to shower you with unconditional love? Join the club, pal. Yeah, join the club.
This particularly applies to Woody and his arc. The series makes it abundantly clear that the love of a child makes life worthwhile for a toy. Toy Story is often seen as analogous to the parent-child relationship, but I think it can also take on a different meaning, specifically in Toy Story 4.
Who's Andy?
Andy was my other kid.
Happiness being contingent on serving the one sounds to me like our culturally ingrained emphasis on romantic love, too. Our culture has pervasive messages that finding the one is going to make us happy. Like the companionship between toys and their owners, so many of us pin our self-worth on our significant others. According to a study by CBS, almost 80% of men and 70% of women in my age demographic actively want a relationship in the immediate future. While the degree to which one may want this relationship can vary, it goes without saying that romantic relationships are extremely important to a lot of people. Bo Peep in Toy Story 4 completely flips this concept on its head by introducing the idea that a toy can be happy without the companionship of a child. It doesn't change the rules of the universe, as the love of a child is still celebrated in the film. That being said, it sets forth the radical idea that while the love of another child is valid, it is not the end-all be-all of purpose. A toy can live without a kid. Toy Story 4 came out the summer of last year. I was in a really interesting place in my life, about to start college and all. Never had a relationship, nor a first kiss, Not even a first date. Just lots of crushes and lots of disappointment. And I was ashamed. Not so much resentful, but I felt as if I was less of a person because I did not have someone to build me up in the context of romance. That there was something wrong with me because I couldn't get a date. It goes beyond this, though. I'd been pining over one girl in particular for a lot of high school, and even though I'd known for a long time my feelings weren't reciprocated, I was living a life in which I was romanticizing the idea of unrequited feelings. As if, even though I respected her wishes and wasn't trying to make a change, I would go to all kinds of lengths to continue to connect with her. I knew she wouldn't change how she felt, but I still felt as if I had a debt to pay.
Because it's all I have left to do. I don't have anything else.
As if I had to continue my affection because there was something noble about it. I would project those feelings onto other projects and other people, other crushes, which was a really unhealthy path.
There's plenty of kids out there. It can't be just about the one you're still clinging to.
I remember feeling really uncomfortable and challenged when, over the course of Toy Story 4, Woody is doing the exact same thing. He finds purpose in saving Forky because he's projecting Andy onto his new owner, Bonnie. Seeing one of my childhood icons have the same vices as me was incredibly interesting. While I laughed at the antics of Ducky and Bunny and Duke Kaboom as the film played out, initially I had something of a mental solemnity, as I waited to see what was going to happen in the end to one of my favorite characters of all time. This, of course, culminates in the somewhat divisive ending. In a move that I guess is kind of obvious in retrospect, but I personally did not see coming, all is well in the end. But instead of going back to Bonnie and continuing to project Andy onto her, he actively chooses to become a lost toy. Some take issue with this ending because at face value, Woody is leaving his longtime friends to travel the world with Bo Peep. Yes, I suppose that's one way of putting it, but I argue that when put in context, the film is trying to say something entirely different and far more profound. The point isn't to leave your friends for romantic love, like what many say about Woody and Bo Peep. Our world has an overwhelmingly prevalent message that the idea of the love of another is a key part of being happy in this life. As much as I love the first 3 Toy Story movies, again, more so the first 2, the internal logic of the film series has this idea at the core of society of the toys. There is a lot of value to the joy that comes from the love of another, no doubt about that. But what makes this ending so profound is that Woody, the central character of this universe, who has had this mindset for as long as we've known him, learns from spending time with Bo Peep that his existence is completely valid and important without the love of a kid. The fact that he may or may not now have a romance with Bo Peep doesn't take away from that message. The point is that Woody is free from feeling like he needs to dedicate his life to serving Andy, either literally or vicariously through Bonnie. I will never forget what it was like sitting in the theater piecing together what and why Woody was doing what he was doing. This was the point in the movie that genuinely changed my life. I saw so much in this character, so much of myself, a character that meant so much to me as a child and taught me lessons that I carried through my teenage years. Woody made a choice that challenged the very notions to which I valued myself. I had tons of friends and adults I trust tell me not to base my self-worth in a romantic relationship, or lack thereof. But I didn't believe it. In seeing one of my all-time favorite childhood heroes reject this pervasive societal notion that companionship is essential to happiness, and furthermore clinging to that companionship is not an inherently noble thing, it finally hit me. I finally understood it. I'd heard before that you could be happy without the companionship of a specific person, but I was seeing it at the time and context that resonated with me. In seeing this film, I was seeing for myself that being a lost toy isn't so bad. In fact, it's valid and beautiful. I could be on my own too. Woody's biggest fear was also my biggest fear, and in Toy Story 4 he stops running from it, which made me realize as I sat in the theater that I could do the same. Over the course of that summer and in starting college, I made some really big and important changes. It wasn't easy, and wasn't a perfectly straight path, but I really took the time to work on myself. I learned to let go of that girl and embrace my singleness rather than run from it. I was happy being by myself. In future romantic rejections, I learned not to take a lack of interest as a lack of self-worth on my end. The funny thing is, once I was being okay with being single, really and truly satisfied with the person I was, and embracing my value as a human being, that's when I started naturally clicking romantically with people. In the months after Toy Story 4, I finally had my first date, my first kiss, my first relationship. Absolutely worth the wait. You see, I think that I wasn't ready for a relationship before putting in that work. It's totally cliche, but I had to love myself before I could start dating. I turned my whole life around, learned to value myself outside the context of romance. A compelling visual presentation is what had to actually show me this aphorism was in fact a great truth. I'm so much happier in my day-to-day life than I was this time last year. And this epiphany that led to profound personal growth came from a film that everyone, myself included, initially brushed off as a cynical and unimaginative sequel to an animated film for little children. It goes without saying that the common interpretation of the Toy Story films is that they are analogous to the parent-child relationship. Yes, that is probably what was intended for Toy Story 4 as well. But the fact that I was able to connect with Toy Story 4 in a way that was probably unintentional speaks to how art can move people in ways that the artist never even imagined. I turn to Roland Barthes' idea of the death of the author. Barthes argues that the intentions and beliefs of the author do not hold any merit in terms of interpretation of a work. Operating under this definition, I believe that what I got from the film is valid, even if it was unintentional. Toy Story 4 producer Mark Nielsen argues that a change in Woody's character was essential to make the story interesting. And while my interpretation might be unique in some regards, I think that it does come from a place the creators intended to a certain extent. In an interview with DigitalSpy.com, he says, quote, "We grew more and more excited with the idea of really coming up with an emotional finish, and a way for Woody to go off and have a second chance at a new way to find his purpose that was even bigger than the purpose he had when he was in Andy's room or Molly's room." I'm not trying to say that the relationship between Woody and Andy was a romantic one. Rather, I see love as a pervasive, universal idea. There are many different kinds of love. Familial love, romantic love, platonic love. I argue that anyone who has ever loved or been loved in any form can identify with the message of these films. Another thing that I've learned in the past year as a side effect of the epiphany brought on by this movie is that all kinds of love are equally valid. Platonic love is just as crucial and can be just as strong as romantic love. The great thing about art is that we can take what the film is saying and apply it to our own lives, but maybe not in the same way as another person. This video wasn't the most academic of video essays, but if you take anything away from my story, it's that art is important. We can advise our family and friends, but sometimes a visual presentation that is well constructed is what's necessary to move people and change lives. I also think that any art has the potential to move people. It's hard to imagine that a movie called Toy Story 4 could do that. But if you go into any movie with an open heart, then maybe you can be inspired too. I think this also speaks to the importance of using pop culture to challenge and inspire change. Toy Story 4 resonated with me as a standalone film, but also works well because Woody is a character that is ingrained into our culture. I do not think that there's anything inherently wrong with big-budget movies from huge intellectual properties. I do think that these films have a responsibility to inspire us to be better, because huge intellectual properties have power in our culture. These movies made $3 billion over the course of 24 years, spread across generations of viewers.
That this is the worst movie I have ever seen in my entire life.
Seemingly pointless sequels can justify their existence if they have something important to say. It can be just as powerful as completely original films. Over the course of the past year, I've collected every single Toy Story 4 Lego set. You can argue that I'm wasting my money on buying toys for literal 4-year-olds, but these toys in particular make me happy. I have the Toy Story 4 collection with an eye shot in my room, and keeping them there serves as a reminder of the fact that I am being my best self. They're just toys used to market the movie, but it is important to me to remember that this kid's movie taught me a genuinely crucial lesson. To me, that's what this movie stands for. We are valuable even without the love of another. If there's any chance that this video reaches anyone who worked on the film, I just want to say thank you from the bottom of my heart, and I understand art and life and how valuable I truly am now. I'm not lost. Not anymore.
To infinity and beyond.